Hey everyone, this is Fugu from Creator DAO, and I'm here with Gradient and Joyce from Gro Protocol. How's it going, everyone?
Hey, happy
Hey,
to be here. Thanks for having us.
Welcome, welcome. Happy to have you guys, and we'll just dive straight in. Gradient, I believe you're the founder of Gro Protocol, if I'm not mistaken. What's your background?
So my path into DeFi and this wonderful space went through music and finance. I spent a long time at Spotify building music service across the world, distributing a lot of it over in APAC. And then I joined a mobile bank and I worked at Revolut for a while here in the UK. And as the DeFi building blocks got into place after a long time of white papers and promises, finally the building blocks were in place. Then decided to switch my night job into my day job and got going with a couple of other people to start building Gro Protocol, which was in August a year and a half ago about.
Sounds like the typical crypto story that we've all experienced. It started off as something small and it just grew bigger and bigger and bigger until it encompassed everything.
Indeed, like a snowball rolling down the hill. How about you, Joyce?
so for myself, I would say the first time, well, I have been more of a management consultant, and then afterward working in traditional finance, particularly in terms of credit card, trying to make it easier to get credit, even especially for those who never had credit history before. So it is something that is just really dear and near to me about access to financial services. And because DeFi is a space where you don't need permissions to do that. And that's what really draws me to this space.
And so since you started in TradFi, crypto, is it similar to the Gradient story where it just started as something small and just slowly took over your whole life?
I would say I actually started while I was in school in trying to, hop into the trend at that point. It was 2018. Little did I know that I went in at the point when it started crashing. So it wasn't the very first, impression wasn't exactly the most positive at that point. So I completely left the space. It was really up until 2020 when I was looking more back into how is the frontiers of finance doing, and that I actually met Gradient, and then that's how I got to join Gro. So it's really Gro that pulled me back into the DeFi space and crypto in general.
Very nice. Well, Gradient, so you mentioned earlier that you kind of had this Web2 startup background and then you moved more full-time into crypto. How did you start exactly with Gro? What was the impetus for saying, I'm going to start my own DeFi protocol?
So DeFi summer of 2020, the yields were bountiful, and not only the one with vegetables names, but many others too. And it was an exciting time. And whenever you talk to people outside of DeFi about some of the yields, then people always looked at it with a bit of disbelief and like, yes, because there's a lot of risk in there and that's why the yields are high. And yes, that was the case in some places, but there was also some risk that was probably not properly priced in. So yields were probably higher than the risk really should allow them to be. But when you tell someone not in DeFi, hey, you should put your assets into this high yield place, how can you give them a sense of reassurance? And so what we wanted to create was a high yield savings account with deposit protection. So the same kind of protection people feel when they put their assets into a bank account. And when you look at the protection possibilities in DeFi, there's no really any option, like there was no DeFi version of deposit protection. When you were going to get insurance through one of the insurance protocols in DeFi, it was always, okay, you have to buy it over some period of time at some amount and you have to pay extra for it. It worked more like a travel or health insurance. But when you go to a bank and say, hey, I want to put $100 in you, open an account with you, the bank doesn't say, hey, do you want to buy some deposit insurance on top of that? Or can you pay extra for the deposit insurance? But that's how deposit insurance protection worked in DeFi. And so we wanted to create a more DeFi native version of deposit protection. And the way we went about that was to then look at risk tranching, which is kind of one of the core mechanics in the Gro protocol, to tranche up the risk, to split up and break up the risks into two parts, one which is high risk and one which is low risk. And the part which is the low risk, which is one that's more akin to a high yield savings account, it gives up some of its yield as payment for getting that protection. And that payment is given to the high risk tranche, which then has more risk, but also more yield.
Nice. That's very cool. That's great how you really take an effort to protect people's savings. You probably know, well, everyone's aware that there's been tons and tons of hacks lately. So taking people's security seriously is definitely a huge, huge selling point. But I was wondering, why do you call yourselves Gro?
It's a Swedish word. It means to grow in Swedish, Gro.
Wait, so I've been pronouncing it wrong the whole time?
Well, if you want to speak Swedish, then yeah. If you wanna speak English, then I guess grow works as well. Yeah. Or if you're French, it's a word for fat, but let's not make references to that.
Well, I mean, it is all connected because I guess the idea is you want to grow people's portfolios with yield, and maybe getting fat includes growth as well.
Did I just incept a bunch of memes here that I should avoid to do? Okay.
No, it's totally, memes are huge. Memes are great.
Oh, let's go with the Swedish pronunciation of Gro. Yeah. Also, I've been working with growth. So my prior jobs, both at Spotify and Revolut, were growth related. I led the growth department over at Revolut. So we were all about growth, 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 growth.
Regarding your identities, are you guys totally open, or you're anonymous? What's your current situation regarding that?
Yeah, we are currently a completely doxed team. And it is interesting because I think in a lot of traditional finance space, you are always a known entity, even at the individual level, right? Which isn't quite the norm here in DeFi. But we believe that being a doxed team or not anonymous team give people more confidence, and it helps us build trust with our users. Fundamentally, we are all talking about someone's savings here, as you said. And so we are really hoping to make every effort to make our users feel that they're secure, and also that they can rely on us.
That's great. I mean, especially in this climate right now, I'm sure you guys are aware of the fiasco that happened over at Time Wonderland, where everybody was anonymous, and it turns out that the person in charge of the treasury was actually a convicted criminal.
Yeah, I think this is a lot of times where trust does play a big part in any financial system. And that's why we are hoping that Doxxed team give more confidence to the users.
Nice, nice. Well, that's great to hear. And what have you guys learned so far in this, I guess, these relatively early stages of Gro Protocol?
So we started off building the protocol without any governance token incentives or anything like that, and just building the core protocol to make sure that everything works and all the products interact as they're expected to. And I think we thought there would be more people, normal people, looking for low risk options. But what we have seen is that people are quite risk on and are definitely interested in as much yield as possible. So the kind of customer profile we've seen have expressed an interest in the low risk option are more those with a more conservative risk profile, like treasuries, like DAO treasuries, and not necessarily the high yield seeking degens. And so one of the things we've taken on board from that learning is to indeed now gear the protocol more towards higher yielding strategies with a slightly more aggressive risk profile, but still well within what people are used to accepting, curve pools with billions of dollars inside. So customer understanding basically of diving deeper into what kind of customer profiles are in DeFi today, but still being aware that who is in DeFi today is not going to be the people who are in DeFi tomorrow. This is an industry that's in a very nascent and young stage. And so as there are more and more interfaces coming out that brings on board more people into DeFi, such as our partnership with Argent, there are also people with diverse risk profiles that come in there and are looking for different types of yield. Not everyone is chasing vegetable farms.
Let's talk about these kind of users and how they relate to the platform. I guess it involves a rewind just for a second, a little bit. Gro Protocol, what exactly is it? And okay, let's assume that I'm a user. I've never used Gro Protocol at all. I enter the website. What am I able to do?
I think where everyone who comes to Gro Lab today would be able to deposit your stable coins into our products, depending on how much risk you would like to take on. If you're someone who looks for lower risk, then you can use the Power stablecoin, where it has yield associated with it, but more importantly, it has the protection that can protect you against failure of some of the underlying stablecoins or protocols, which is giving people the peace of mind that you don't need to constantly look over your shoulders and wonder if your deposits are great and safe with us. Now, there are also people who are looking for a higher yield, and those people we have bought for them where it is still going to have all the yield sources are generated by very reliable sources, different reliable protocols like Curve, and previously we've also have Aave, Compound. But then fundamentally, these people are interested in higher risk and want to get the higher returns. So depending on your appetite, you can choose one of the two products. Now, the fun thing about it is we are constantly evolving, and having heard from our community that some of them want even higher yield, we have decided 2 months ago to launch on Avalanche with Labs. Labs is an automated leverage yield farming product. In short, you would no longer just be giving your money to people who are using liquidity pools to facilitate trading, or you're not just using the money to lend to other people, but rather we have that deposit to borrow further AVAX, so a volatile asset, in order to do more aggressive yield farming. But the twist is that because it's automated, again, it is very consistent that you don't need to keep worrying about, you don't have to manually operate any of that. It's really deposit and then sit back and let the strategies work for you. So it's really depending on your risk appetite and what are the yields you're looking for. We have those 3 different stablecoin products for every user.
So what assets can I use right now to earn yields on Gro Protocol?
You could bring in any USDC, USDT, or DAI, and then you'll be able to deposit into any of those 3 products.
Very cool. Do you have plans to expand to other assets, for example, Ether or wrapped Bitcoin?
At the moment, we're a stablecoin protocol, and we put that at the core. But there's also the risk tranching mechanic. Assuming there's a sufficiently broad set of strategies, could also work on other types of assets. But we decided to first go heavily on the stablecoin side. And by the way, it's also a space which is growing probably by another stablecoin per week.
Yeah, the stablecoin space is really wild right now. If you just follow the amount of protocols, there's something new popping up every week.
Yeah, and we are excited to also have our own stablecoin powered, which is quite interesting, as most other people think of stablecoin as a means to transact, and that means you probably don't expect yield associated with it unless you do something, unless you take the steps to go through yield farming, lending, or whatnot. But for Powered, it has built-in yield, so to speak, where you don't really need to think about it. You just hold it, and then through a rebasing mechanism, you would get more powered over time. So it's really an interesting one, and we are looking forward to bring that to more people.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to also diving into that in a bit. But on the space, well, in the space of yield aggregators, I mean, there's many that our listeners will be familiar with, like we have Yearn and Beefy and so on. How does Gro stand out amongst them, and what's your competitive advantage?
Well, first off, we're both a yield optimizer as well as a risk tranching protocol. So what the risk tranching on top of the yield does is to provide leverage. So the leveraged option has higher yield than if you have the same type of strategies without the leverage option. So that allows that product to basically deliver a higher yield. And then the lower risk option offers something that's not anywhere else in the space, which is this protection for the assets that are inside the protocol. So both that leverage as well as the protection are unique products on top of the yield generating strategies. Then the yield generating strategies themselves, we have already launched Labs, which is already containing a new set of strategies, and some of those could be rolled into the main Vault and Powered. But then the sources of yield are a number of different protocols that are quite established in DeFi. And there are some of those strategies that we also have built ourselves. So I mean, let's be blunt, the majority of yield within DeFi for majority of these come from very similar places. Curve and CRV rewards, as well as lending income from Compound and Aave, are some of the biggest sources of yield in the space, as well as AMM income from, or maybe income is the right word, but AMM returns from LPing into different liquidity pools. So I think the liquidity pool and having a market exposure neutral approach to liquidity pools is a completely new thing we haven't seen anywhere else. But then generating yield from Aave, Compound, and Curve is obviously broadly established in the industry. And the unique part there is the risk tranching that comes on top.
For people who are more, or who don't have the financial lingo, what is risk tranching? Like what's the explain it like on 5 version? So
let's say you have $100 in the system. Okay, if you're 5 years old, you probably only have $10. Okay, let's say you have $10 in this product. And so someone who didn't want a lot of risk, they put in $5, and someone else who wanted risk, they put in $5. And so there's $10 in total in the system. And they're put into 5 different pots, 5 different strategies. So there's now $2 in each of those strategies. And then suddenly someone comes and pushes over one of those pots, and the money falls out and the money is lost. So now you only have 4 pots left. There are $2 in each of those pots. So you have $8 left in total. Now, if you didn't have risk tranching, then both of those 2 people, both the high risk and low risk person, would have lost $1 each. But what the risk tranching does is instead says, okay, those $2 that were lost will be taken from the high risk person. And you, low risk person, you get to keep all your dollars. So there's still a $2 loss in the system, but now high risk is $2 shorter, so they have $3 left, whereas the low risk person, they get to keep all their $5. And that's how the risk tranching works. It basically allocates any losses to one side in benefit of the other side.
All right, and you have a risk tranching mechanism. So how does that work for the risk balancer?
So that is the risk tranching mechanism, the risk balancer. So the risk balancer allocates as people deposit and withdraw dollaroos from the protocol, stablecoins from the protocol, those stablecoins get allocated to the strategies and the stablecoins that are currently underweight. Or if someone withdraws from the protocol, then withdraws from whatever is overweighted. And that means that each user interaction is continuously driving the protocol towards a balanced distribution of assets into different stablecoins and protocols. So the risk balancing becomes autonomous and rather driven by the users themselves through their interactions with the protocol.
So if there's a black swan event, for example, and one of the underlying pools, not a pool that's on Gro Protocol, but an external pool that you guys are using for your vaults, if it's exploited, how can that damage be contained with the risk balancer?
In the same way that I explained with this example of the different pots with money. The way that it's contained is 2 ways. First off, there can't be too many assets allocated to any one given stablecoin or any one given protocol. If all the assets are in one protocol or in one stablecoin, then obviously if that one thing fails, then all the money is lost. And that's a problem. That's one of the aspects to consider with many other risk tranching protocols that says, hey, we're going to tranche the risk in this protocol. And so there's a high risk tranche and low risk tranche in this one protocol. But if that one protocol fully fails, it doesn't matter if you're the high risk tranche, the low risk tranche, because all the money is lost. And so it kind of defeats the purpose unless you have portfolio diversification. So risk tranching on a single asset only really works if the asset doesn't go to zero and it's only a part to loss. But if you have a portfolio that's split up into multiple assets and multiple strategies, that actually allows you to have complete failure, God forbid, but complete failure of an asset or protocol and still maintain the protection, because the portfolio is not exposed more to that asset or that protocol than it's possible for one of the sides, i.e. the high risk side, to handle the complete loss and thus maintaining protection for the low risk side, which is the powered stablecoin.
Regarding the yield for the different vaults, well, one of the yield sources is trading fees from AMMs. Do these strategies expose users to impermanent loss, or will that somehow be abstracted away since other yield sources, for example, could compensate for it?
it depends on the strategy. So if you look at the AMM strategies in core protocol with Vault and Powered, there the AMM strategy is Curve, which is a stablecoin AMM, which uses a stable swap curve. And in a stablecoin AMM, the assumption is that the dollar prices of these assets are roughly around the same, it's roughly $1. And so there's never any real enduring permanent loss because the prices kind of move and hover around that $1 point. Thus, there's not really any impermanent loss that has to be taken into account because they tend to return to peg. In the other side of it, however, and this is where we have the Labs product on Avalanche, there we're actually LPing into AMM, into liquidity pools with a volatile asset plus a stablecoin. And so indeed, then impermanent loss becomes a very important thing to consider. So, and should we dive in and talk about Labs and explain how that works? Because that's kind of, the more complicated answer to your question is how impermanent loss is handled in Labs, but it's the next product. So
what is Labs?
Yeah. And yeah, sorry for maybe we're jumping around here a bit in the flow, but the Labs product is an even higher yielding set of strategies. And currently, it's on Avalanche, which means that you're looking at faster block times and lower costs to transact with it. It costs, like, I think 30 cents or so to deposit stablecoins into one of the labs. What the labs do is, first off, they don't have this risk tranching on top of them. So these are just standalone single strategies. You choose one of the stablecoins, use the C, use the T, or die. And that's the only stablecoin that you have in each of the labs. What then the protocol does, it borrows AVAX, and it combines AVAX that has been borrowed with a stablecoin that the user has deposited and puts them into a AMM pool at Trader Joe, which is a Uniswap fork on Avalanche. And then it generates trading fees in that AMM pool, as well as various token incentives. So Joe incentives and Avalanche Rush AVAX incentives. And then on a relatively regular basis, it sells those off and converts them into more yield, allows the yield to compound. So this is all nice because then you end up having something like 30–40% APY, all compounded into a stablecoin yield. Now, impermanent loss becomes a challenge here because the way that the value of your assets are distributed between different types of assets in a pool changes depending on the relative price of those assets compared to when you open up the position. So what that means is that if you open up an LP position with stablecoins and AVAX, and then the price of AVAX goes up because people are buying more AVAX, then the amount of AVAX that you have in your LP position goes down because you now have less AVAX at a higher price per AVAX. And then you have a little bit more stablecoins. But the way that we have the loan set up is that you're basically borrowing the AVAX for this LP position. And the amount that you've borrowed doesn't go up or down based on the movement inside this LP pool. It's rather fixed with a bit of interest that's accruing all the time. So what this means is that when the price of AVAX moves, you end up either with more AVAX or less AVAX compared to when you open up the position, which means that you're either holding more than you need to pay back for your loan or holding less than you need to pay back the loan. And so when you then close down this LP position, you either have to sell off the excess AVAX or buy more AVAX with your excess stablecoin so that you can repay your loan. And only after you've done that action can you then repay the loan and return the stablecoin only position that you put in there. So this means that if you're doing this manually outside the labs, you then have to monitor it quite closely in case the market starts pumping or dumping to ensure that your exposure doesn't become too high, whether it's short or long exposure. And yeah, that's what the protocol, what Labs does. And this is quite technical. From a user point of view, it's really easy. It's basically, it's a lab, you put in your stable dollars in there, stable coins in there, and then see a number go up. Now, because it is an impermanent loss strategy, oh, and by the way, not forward-looking statements, not financial advice, this is just software, all that stuff. the way that the impermanent loss strategy does work is that sometimes when there's a very sharp movement up or down, then there can be a negative return during a short period of time, which then usually gets compensated quite quickly by yield being generated after that. So when you're looking at the long-term yield, you're looking at 30-40% APY, but there's been moments when it's been higher and it's been moments when it's been lower. So it's not quite as number only go up, but it is generally number go up, occasionally go down a little bit, but very little. And the reason why it is so little is because there are these cut-off thresholds that forces the position to go back into market neutral and doesn't become too exposed, either short or long, on the volatile asset.
God, I'm actually looking at the webpage right now, and it shows the different strategy cycles. So it shows the gains, the losses, and you are correct. The gains are definitely significantly larger than the losses. So it does add up to a positive APY, which is quite lucrative. I see 35.49 APY on the USDC pool right now.
Yeah, that's right.
How did you end up on? Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I would say in general, it is also done so because we tend to, if there is an event where there is major pump or dump, which means the position is going into a loss, because it's being cut with discipline as it's automated, and then it's being cut really quickly. So I think any of those losses would be limited. While if the market continues to go up and down, but they are volatile in both ways, so the market overall, the price is staying rather stable, then we will see the yield will continuously generating as we would keep that position open for a longer period of time. This is to explain why, in general, you would see overall the yields tend to be more positive because of the way that at any point we see the strategies may not be performing as well as we want them to be. The automation makes sure there is a discipline of cutting loss.
Got it. And how did you guys decide to go with Avalanche for your first multi-chain foray?
There was a lot of requests in the DAO around, well, actually we talked about L2s primarily, but in general, it's just cheaper gas that people were looking for. And the network that most people were clamoring for was actually Avalanche. So a lot of Avalanche supporters who were asking specific for that. And when one of our partners, Alpha Homora, which is the one we're working together with, and Iron Bank through Alpha Homora, was launching an Avalanche, then it's like, okay, well, we can launch that strategy on Avalanche. So yeah, there was both community as well as one of our partners working on Avalanche already. So it became quite a good place to go. And because it's EVM compatible, of course, then an expansion there is more straightforward and easier.
Do you have plans to expand to more L2s and different sidechains?
Yeah, there's been various requests around various types of expansion. Now we have a Labs product, which is working in a more standalone way than the core protocol on Ethereum L1. And in fact, we already have now Ethereum L2 through ZkSync. The Vault token, so the Gro Vault product, can be available through the Argent app. So if you got Argent and ZkSync, you can then access the Vault product through there.
Very, very cool. But right now, I see that if you want to use the lab product, it has some sort of token gating. Can you just explain the requirements for using the labs right now?
Sounds good. Right now in labs, it is something we are looking to change as we launch the updated version, by the way. But in the original launch, we have used 500 GRO tokens as a gate in order to say this is a really have higher yields, and we want to make sure those who are the most committed to the DAO would get priority access into that, which is why we have the gate for us to say, if you have GRO tokens, then you get priority access. We are looking to make it less binary, less like you either get in or out in the next version. So instead, everyone would be able to get into labs and start using it. But then we'll put a cap on it, which means you would have $5,000 worth of deposit allowance per vault, per USDC, USDT, or DAI vault. And then this is the base that you can work with, see if you like it or not. But then we do reserve a higher deposit allowance to those still holding 500 GRO tokens or more. This is in a way we would love to balance the fact that a lot of people have asked us to open access, but at the same time, we want to make sure our DAO members still get the best out of the protocol as they have been supporting us all along.
If it would be totally open, would that result in a lower APY?
If it were to be totally open, I think before we get to the lower APYs, we would hit a ceiling depending on the AVAX borrowing capacity already, where because we are borrowing AVAX through stablecoins, currently we tend to see at 90% utilization for AVAX borrowing, which is why we also need to make sure there is an overall cap that we don't go beyond that, because that has two limitations. One is at certain point, people cannot borrow anymore, and you have more and more stable coins that is being used in reserve, which is not generating yield. So yes, in that case, you would definitely see a lower overall yield because relatively less and less capital is being put into work. On the other hand, we also see that as the utilization level for the AVAX borrowing goes up, you will see the interest rate goes up as well. So that would further eat into yield. So to answer your question, yes, and that's because of the way that how borrowing AVAX currently works on Alpha Homora.
Now, hearing all these products sound really great, and the Labs product sounds really cool. They do also sound quite complex. And how do you guys make sure that users of Gro Protocol their funds are kept secure and the protocol stays free of hacks? Do you have audits or do you take other security measures?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say they come in different ways. We are trying to make sure people's funds are safe. So first of all, as you mentioned, we have done audits in the past and also planning more in the future. In the past, we have worked with PackShield and Kurtberry for 2 different audits before we officially launch. On the same time, we have also engaged with Code Arena in order to further examine the code. Now, after we have done the token launch, we understand there is more and more people using our protocol, which is why the first vote that comes after token launch was about security, asking the DAO to give us funds to, 1, increase our bug bounty at Immunify from $60,000 to $1 million. And secondly, also putting those extra funds into hiring Trail of Bits, one of the very better known auditors in the space, to make sure that we are having a scheduled upcoming audit with them in spring, I think. So we will be using those ways to make sure it is safe. This is what I would say is something we are making sure that things, if anything is not going well, we would know in advance rather than like waiting for things to actually go wrong. But there is also another layer we have built into it, which is using Chainlink to help us avoid manipulation of price oracles, where we have been looking at a lot of deposits and a lot of times exploits come from oracle manipulation. We decided that we need more security measures around it. So on top of just using what is available at, say, Curve to tell us what is the right price for USDC, USDT, or DAI, we are also caching those different values every time we run a harvest of those strategies. And then on top of it, we would make sure the cash value is not being compromised by double checking that with Chainlink price feed. So then we have multiple ways to ensure any of those prices are within reasons and not something that has been manipulated. So we're using both system design as well as a lot of the audits and bug bounty to make sure the funds are safe with us.
Got it. Right now, I see that you consider Gro Protocol in beta phase. At what point will you guys be considered, I guess, the full version or V1?
Yeah, maybe after our 4th audit. And DeFi space is an experimental space, and we've done a lot of efforts on security. There have been discussions whether we should remove it already, but we're keeping it on for now. We haven't fixed any specific milestone when we'll remove it.
Well, it is always good to have that warning there, at least to say, like, even though we have been audited, you have to take, it's DeFi and there is always risk. So don't put in more than you can afford to lose. So I do appreciate that. And you have a good link to your security section where you clearly say all your audits. And that's a really great feature. Great
to know. We'll keep doing that.
And going back, you guys were talking about the powered stablecoin, or the PWRD. Can you just speak on that for a second? What is it in a nutshell?
Powered stablecoin in a nutshell is one that gives you yield with protection. So anyone that puts money into it would be able to generate yield through the yield strategies that we use at the protocol. But then because they are looking to be shielded from the risk of, say, protocol failure, that's why they would also be giving some of that yield over to Fort. In return, they got the protection that comes with by Fort absorbing any losses first before it gets to powered. So it is really a stable coin with yield and protection at the same time.
And how do I get some powered?
You can get some powered in two ways. So first of all, we'll always love everyone to come to our DApp in order to get powered by depositing USDC, USDT, or DAI. And it is a really simple process of depositing. And with that, then you would, boom, you have the powered in your wallet. Now the yield will be generated through rebasing. So if you start with 1,000 powered, then going forward, any of the yield would then come in extra powered tokens available right in your wallet. Another way for people to get DAI right now is that we have got a curve pool. It is a curve meta pool with powered and the 3 major stablecoins. So you can also choose to go there in order to swap for powered through that pool as well. And we are also looking to get curve gauge on that pool, so then potentially anyone who's providing liquidity could also be benefiting from the system.
And how do you make sure that it maintains the peg of $1?
So we have a number of different AMM pools up and running with powered. We have a curve pool, which has, I think, around $14 million of depth in it. And we have a couple of Uniswap pools as well with powered. And there are a number of arbitrageurs that are trading with those pools as there are price movements of the various assets.
And fundamentally, because any user would be able to get one USDC, one USDT, or one DAI from one powered. So any user with one power token, you can always redeem that amount, the 1 USDC from our protocol. So that is what drives a lot of the arbitrage opportunity for those who are in that space, because you would know always that the redemption at our protocol is available at a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, so there's the redemption, which you can do through main protocol. And then in addition, there's also the over collateralization by vault protecting power. So you have both the basic redemption value and then the additional protection against the other kind of risks we talked about before.
And how does your deposit protection stack up against competitors like MStable, for example?
I'm not sure they have that. If you look at the MStable or even like a curve pool or whatever, the one asset can be swapped at either 1-to-1 if it's a constant sum formula, or if it's a constant product, then a little bit less depending on the magnitude of it. And so what that means is if there's failure of any asset in an AMM, in a pool where you can swap one asset for another, then the pool will be filled up by that broken or underpriced asset. Whereas in Gro Protocol, the different assets are compartmentalized and isolated from each other. So that's why it can handle the failure of the assets. If any of the 3 major stablecoins failed, so USDC or DAI, then Curve as a whole would have a big problem, right? Because the 3 CRV pool and all the meta pools with it would suddenly be filled up with the failed asset.
So far, we've talked about the powered stablecoin. We've talked about the labs, but we haven't yet really gotten deep into the vaults. What are the current strategies that your vaults are using?
Right now, we have been looking into 3 different yield sources. In general, we are putting money into either lending, which is going through Aave or Compound, or AMMs, which is going through Curve. And then with all of those, we will also be getting extra governance token incentives. So fundamentally, I would say from a user side, your exposure is the same no matter, your allocation is the same no matter whether you're putting that in vault or powered, except if there is, at the time comes when you generate yield, or if you come across a loss of funds events, then those would first go to vault, meaning that the vault takes on more risk and gets more yield, versus like powered would, on the other side, would get lower yield, but also getting the protection. But ultimately, both of them are utilizing the same set of yield strategies.
And from my understanding, it's a fork of Yearn v2.
Well, there's some code, some parts of the code are derived from Yearn. Yeah.
And how do the vault strategies differ from Yearn? Are they the same? Are they different? How have you changed them?
So the risk balancer is not integrated into the way that capital is allocated between different strategies in a Yearn vault is different. It's more like a greedy allocator algorithm that optimizes for the highest yield. It doesn't try to compartmentalize the different strategies. So that's one of the key changes. How up to certain levels capital is allocated to any other strategies within the vault. That's the key, one of the key differences. There's also a fair bit of like, because of that, and the other thing as well is there's a single vault where all stablecoins go in. So unlike a traditional Yearn vault where it's a single asset vault, the Gro Protocol vault is a multi-asset one. So you can deposit any of the stablecoins into one single vault. So that means we had to do a lot around pricing of those assets to ensure that whatever you're depositing is valued at the price when you deposit it, and there's no angle for attack created by that. So it's a multi-asset vault with risk tranching, risk balancing. And then the strategies right now, like I mentioned before, are generating yield from lending protocols and from Curve in the main strategies.
Well, what really fascinates me about your vaults and sounds very innovative is your integrations with ZkSync and with Argent wallets. Can you just talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so the vault product is accessible through the Argent ZkSync or ZkSync if you're British or American, through the mobile app. And that means, I think it's $1 or something like that to access the product there, which then mirrors the price performance of the vault on mainnet. And then with some regular basis, the assets on the ZkSync rollup are reconciled with balances also on Ethel1. So you can track the growth of the ZkSync vault balances through Etherscan. You can see how many Gro vault tokens there are locked up in ZkSync. So from a user point of view, it's just create your ZkSync wallet and then put your stable coins in there if you have any, or you can deposit with one of the various deposit fiat on ramps that are connected through to ZkSync. And then you're good to go.
Great. I actually have the ZkSync wallet open right now. So I was just curious. I opened it up and yeah, this is really cool. You just on your regular wallet, you go to the invest tab and you can invest either USDC or DAI in your leverage yield vaults. And it's got a pretty good APY. It actually, it has double the APY of the Yearn vault.
We are very excited to be partnering with Argent, and we have been partnering with them since our very early days, even before our public beta launch. As a matter of fact, they have been working with us on Ethereum mainnet. So aside from ZkSync, you can also use the Ethereum mainnet products where you can get both vaults and powered through Argent. And on top of just using the mobile app that they provide, if you're on Ethereum mainnet, you can also connect your Argent wallet to our DEP through Wallet Connect. So it's really hoping to be able to offer the flexibility for users, and then you can access your Gro funds no matter whether it's on mobile or whether you're on your laptop.
Do you think all these tools that are being made for mobile, like especially Argent, is very, very simple to use. It's very, very streamlined. And do you think these things are going to be able to onboard, I guess, the next generation of DeFi users and really contribute to Gro's growth?
I think there's a lot of people who in the future will use DeFi that will not know what a private key is, and even think about how to get fiat into stablecoins, because that will just be one smooth integrated flow. So beyond the shadow of doubt, is there going to be a lot of innovation and work done there with the likes of Argent that will be smoothing up those flows. So right now, this is more like I would say, maybe not 2400 BPS modem of the olden days, but maybe like a 2880 baud modem.
You're speaking as if the generation now will understand what that means.
As a boomer with a modem, pre broadband.
We'll call it the slow internet phase.
Right, and I would also say that in general, we are hoping to make it as streamlined as possible, because onboarding the next 100 million people into DeFi would likely mean that we cannot ask everyone to spend hours understanding each protocol, understanding how yield farming works differently on different pools. And so where we are looking at is providing products simple to use, even though they might be complex in the background, but from the user side, so simple to use that it would not require that learning curve to begin with. So we'll get more and more people using DeFi as the default.
Got it. Now, the GRO token itself, what is it and what does it do?
GRO token is our governance token, where anyone holding that would have a vote on the protocol's future. The way we are looking at that is anyone who is holding the GRO tokens today, we are welcoming everyone to provide us feedback and raising new proposals on our community forum. Then once it goes into the voting space, anyone with GRO tokens can vote, and each token will be one vote. So this is really hoping for us to get governance into the hands of our own community.
Very cool. And I see that you had recently a proposal on your website through governance to do with the GRO token. What changes were implemented?
We have been looking into that with really open mind to understand what the community would love us to steer that to, because after all, it is the DAO is for all of us. And so we have gotten feedback around hoping to make sure, while they appreciate the vesting schedule we currently have on our DApp, which is saying it is any rewards you get from liquidity mining, for example, would be vested over 12 months with 10% upfront. Say if someone comes in, they want to just immediately profit, they would have to they could take 10% with them and giving up the remaining 90% to other token holders. And it is an interesting part because they're not giving that back up to the DAO treasury, but to other users who are happy to stick with us for the longer term. And this is ultimately coming with the aim to concentrate or getting more governance into the hands of our longer term supporters. Now, what has changed is to say that we understand it could be feeling okay, but they want more flexibility. Sometimes it is not just people who are in it for the 12 months, the long term, or people who want to immediately get out. So they're asking for features where we could enable things like partial exits, while you don't have to make decision for the lump sum, but instead of smaller chunks. We are also enabling people who want to immediately get out an option to get 30% with them, and instead only giving up 70% to the rest of the longer term holders. And why are we happy to do that? Part of that because we understand community would appreciate the flexibility. And on the other hand, it's also feeding back better to the way we have designed it in the first place. Because the incentives for people holding it long term is that every 4 weeks, you can choose to claim from the vesting bonus pool. And the vesting bonus pool comes from the tokens that have been given up by people who want to get out first in the first place. So if there are more people who choose to give up their tokens because they would prefer immediate liquidity, then that bonus pool would get larger, meaning there is more token to be claimed by those who are in it for the long term. And we see that as creating incentive for more people staying with us for the long term rather than looking for the way out. Another part that we have also made changes is to provide stronger connections between protocol performance and also with our GRO DAO tokens. In this change, we have started looking into introducing a performance fee for the yields generated in the protocol. And those yields would now go into 90% of that would go into buying back GRO tokens from the markets, which again, we don't put that into the treasury, but instead put that into the vesting pool, the vesting bonus pool, where the long-term GRO token holders can claim from on a monthly basis. So all in all, I think we are trying to provide more flexibility and also in further encouraging people who are staying with us for the long term by giving them more bonus to claim from.
Now, I heard mention that your community is called the G-Force. Is that correct?
We have the G-Force for the marketing arm of our community. And they are a bunch of people who we have been really glad and very grateful for them in saying, not just wanting to be any community member. And the overall community, we call them Gromies. And then within, we see some people interested in marketing and happy to step forward and raising their hands to get a lot of initiatives going. Those are the people we call G-Force. And we have just finished up our Epoch 2, about to start our Epoch 3.
Okay, so you got the community is called the Gromies. The marketing is called the G-Force. What about the core team? Are you the OGs?
The OGs are actually, so the core team, we actually should come up with a really cooler name now that you talk about that. The OGs right now are people who have been early supporters and consistently helping out in the community. And that is more of an all-encompassing terms for people who contribute by answering questions in community, helping out people who are new to Gro to help them understand our products, as well as I would say anyone who has been giving us valuable feedback about where to take the protocol next. So those people who have been with us for a while, consistently helping out, we will nominate them as an OG, as we believe those are truly members that will love to have more of them coming through in our community, and we believe they deserve being recognized as such.
Got it. Now, if people are listening to the interview right now and they say, I think Gro Protocol sounds pretty awesome, I want to become a community member, what do you advise them to do?
I would encourage them to join our Discord at discord.gg/Gro, but also about thinking through, let's get your hands dirty and start trying out our Gro Lab at app.gro.xyz. I think this is really good ways to get into the community by one, interacting with fellow community members, either the OGs, the G-Force, or anyone else, including the team. On the other hand, it's also we'll love to get more of the feedback that any user give us. Those have been valuable in helping us shape our product upgrades. So definitely keep them coming.
If you are a non-Gro token holder, are there different opportunities if you contribute in the community aspect or to building the DAO internally that you could earn it?
If you're a non-contributor, we'll also be looking about how do we open up the DAO contribution space further. So G-Force is our first effort into doing that, going to that direction. Going forward, we are also looking to have more help in the development space. So that is definitely a space to watch out for. And ultimately, we believe that it's really hard to know, to always having a program. So if anyone individual say, I'm really interested, I want to help out, we welcome them to come to our Discord, chat with us, and then tell us more about where they believe there will be a good fit between the protocol and them as a DAO contributor. We look forward to having many more people working together to grow the Gro Protocol.
Great. And what's coming up on your roadmap first in the near future and then the greater vision in the longer term?
Well, coming up right now is the various product launches we talked about, which is about making labs more broadly available. And I think it might even be this afternoon. I've been saying that for 2 weeks though, so I should probably stop saying any kind of forward-looking statements. But by the time this is heard by anyone, we will have launched it. And then the core protocol changes are happening probably next week. So, and that's going to change both the base APIs and how the GRO token is managed by people, which Joyce talked about before. Then as we look forward, it's about empowering more people everywhere to easily create and share wealth. And that means bringing more yield strategies to more chains, because more chains means places where people don't have to spend a fortune on gas. And there are more and more yield opportunities on those various chains. We have now the L2s are starting to kick off, not just ZkSync, but also the optimistic rollups. And there's probably going to be a wealth of new opportunities on those places across the coming months. So more places for yield at a lower cost. And then there's some other more innovative things in terms of how fiat can be handled that we're working on as well. There's a roadmap which we're going to publish. We have a draft already that we're iterating in some parts of the community, which will share a bit more about the longer ranging roadmap as well.
Was that mention of optimistic rollups an alpha leak?
An optimistic leak.
Any other alpha leaks maybe you could hint at the end of this interview?
I think the accessing labs without even being a member of the DAO is going to be available first within the community for a while, but anyone can access it. So if you hear this before then you can just drop into the labs place and check it out. It's one of the highest places in DeFi where you can get stablecoin yield at around 30-40% just on stables, unincentivized. So that's a pretty slick alpha, I would say.
Nice. I like it. Well, if somebody wants to get involved with Gro Protocol, you can, as you mentioned, join the community, go through the Discord, or you can use your current product via your website or the app on Argent Wallet. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
I would say that's a really good summary. And we are looking forward to rolling out more and more product upgrades. So we're excited to be working with DAO contributors to look more into how we can continuously improve on that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. With that, really want to thank you for this wonderful interview, and definitely let us know if there are anything you believe we could help clarify in terms of the products, the protocol, the roadmap. Happy to share more offline as well.
For sure. Thanks a lot, guys. Gradient, Joyce, thanks for coming on.